Hello everyone, good morning. Good morning to the folks joining from the US and to the rest of the world. It's good evening from us. Thank you all for joining this webinar on ServiceNow GRC. So this webinar is titled as 5 Steps to Achieve GRC Maturity Using ServiceNow. I'm Kavi, your host for the day. I head Marketing and Client Partnership for ServiceNow Practice at Aspire Systems. I have two speakers joining with me. Our first speaker is Clara Abraham. She has over 15 years of experience in IT, and she has been a GRC practitioner herself, and she worked in the compliance domain for over 6 years and helped organizations define, implement, and sustain the ISMS and QMS certifications. Prior to the compliance experience, Clara was working in the software development, and she has 9 years of experience in various areas of the SDLC phases. She's also a certified information systems auditor. She helped in planning and conducting internal audits, and she has conducted risk workshops for various organizations across the globe. Thank you, Clara, for joining the session.
Thank you, Kavi.
And the second speaker we have today is Vignesh Mohan. Vignesh is a ServiceNow developer. He is a certified ServiceNow developer and administrator. He has worked on various projects in Aspire and helped our customers develop various modules in ServiceNow. And his specialization is around the GRC modules, and he has helped some of our customers implement the GRC modules. And he will be the one who is going to demonstrate the GRC use cases today. And he has over 4 years of experience in development and the ServiceNow arena. Welcome to the session, Vignesh.
Hey everyone, thank you.
So before we begin the session, I would like to give a quick introduction about Aspire Systems, the organization I work for, and then we can move on to the agenda of the webinar. So Aspire is a global technology services firm who helps organizations in IT consulting, development, and various other digital services. We are a 3,000 plus employee organization and have around 150 plus active customers who have engagements with us more than 5 years. And we are a CMMI Maturity Level 3 organization with ISO, QMS, and ISMS certifications. Our specialization started in the software engineering space. Around 2 decades back, our founders started this organization initially on the software engineering, where they worked on they worked with ISVs and helped them develop their products. Now, in these 2 decades, we have matured our expertise and experience in various areas, including digital services, test automation, testing, infrastructure and application support, ServiceNow. So those are some of the areas where we are currently operating and offering our services to customers across the globe. We are a Singapore headquartered company with offices in US, UK, Benelux, Poland, Middle East, and India. One thing that we'll share proudly with our customers and prospects is that we have been recognized 10 consecutive times as the best place to work for by GPW Institute and the Economic Times. This actually shows how much attention our organization gives to the employees, and in turn how that translates into how we offer our services to our customers. You can see some of our accolades below, from Technology Fast 500 to Forrester ranking Aspire as one of the top continuous testing service providers. So this is a small brief about Aspire Systems, and you can see the global locations in the next slide. We have our US headquarters in Chicago, and we have offices in San Francisco, Dallas, and New Jersey. So I would like to quickly jump on to the agenda for the session today. So before we begin today's session, So if you have any questions, on the session, or if you would like to ask anything to the presenters, you can drop in your questions in the questions from audience window, and we'll be able to answer your questions after we complete the initial session. So today what we have planned for you is that we will start with the need for GRC. We believe that most of you in this webinar who are already practicing GRC, or who are already in various maturity on GRC. For the benefit of all the audience, we would like to give a short introduction to the need for GRC, why an organization need governance, risk, and compliance in place. And then we'll move on to the different components of GRC. We'll also go through the complexities that organizations mostly face in terms of, or they believe as some of the complexities that are involved in the GRC practice. After we cover this, we will move on to the building blocks of GRC in ServiceNow. One of the reasons why we have taken ServiceNow as our as the product that has offered GRC in this session is because ServiceNow has released GRC product to help businesses respond to threats in real time and respond to risks and create an efficient process to the overall security. So that's the objective why a company like ServiceNow has released GRC. And most of you, I believe, know about the Now platform. ServiceNow is a workflow automation platform where you can automate your IT service management, IT operations management, and business processes like HR, CSM, and governance, risk, and compliance. So the primary reason why we chose ServiceNow is because if you are using ServiceNow, it's very easy to move into the GRC space, because most of the data that the IT generates are already in ServiceNow. So it is one of the most logical steps so that you can utilize the data that is already there for your governance and risk and compliance, so that it will mature your overall GRC and help you get the data in real time and help you in achieving maturity in your security practices. So with that said, we'll move on to the next section, that the GRC maturity. That's the core crux of this webinar, the 5-step approach. And finally, we will cover the first stage today, which is the semi-automated GRC IRM processes using ServiceNow. And after discussing that, we will show 2 use cases on the policy and risk management. So with this, I would like to hand over the session to our GRC expert, Clara. Clara will take up the session and then run you through the next stages. Over to you, Clara.
Thank you, Kavi. Good morning, everyone, and hello to all of you. Welcome to this first webinar in a series of webinars that we are planning on GRC implementation. So here in this slide, you see a number of statistics and survey results on the driving factors that are forcing organizations to think about implementing GRC. And now, as we are seeing these statistics, we also come across news articles about fines imposed on Marriott and British Airways for data breaches and non-compliance against GDPR. With this in mind, we can understand how important implementing GRC is for an organization. First, let us understand overall about GRC. So in an organization, we have the board setting up the business objectives, which is driven and directed by the management using the various business unit and operations teams. So in achieving this business objectives, if there are any risks, what happens, we have to manage these risks at appropriate places and ensure that our business objectives are met. So risk management comes into the picture. and all the data that is generated by the operations of the various business units are reported back to the management, and the board monitors all of these information to ensure and assure that the enterprise is moving towards achieving the business objectives. This is GRC in a nutshell, and with GRC implemented, we have to sustain these GRC practices, and for this we have audits being conducted to assure that all business units and various stakeholders are in compliance with all the policies defined as part of the GRC, and the organization is as well being able to achieve its objectives. With this said, with all of you who are GRC practitioners who are participating in this webinar would definitely appreciate and agree to the enormous amount of work that is involved in implementing and doing all of these GRC related activities. So majorly we have to ensure that we have proper policy management in place. We have to perform risk management and then auditing and collate all the information, consolidate the data we get out of all of these activities we do, and report it back to the management. With all this work in mind, there are so many solutions that are available in the market to automate these GRC activities, and specifically all of these solutions, they support content and document management, risk and control management, audit management, and they have dashboards and reporting features. And on top of this, all of these solutions should be scalable enough. With all the changing regulatory landscape and business scenarios these days, organizations have to adapt all these regulations in the flow, and all these GRC solutions must be scalable enough to be able to support all these new regulations that are being implemented in the organization. So this is the importance of having an automated solution for GRC. With this understanding of GRC, now let us quickly get into the ServiceNow architecture for governance, risk, and compliance. In ServiceNow, the governance, risk, and compliance product is built on the Now platform. The Now platform supports a lot of workflows, dashboards, reporting, and this GRC product is built on the Now platform, and it makes use of all of these features of the platform. And the GRC product itself has 4 applications: the policy and compliance management application, the risk management, audit management, and vendor risk management. For the purpose of this webinar, we'll be considering the policy and compliance management, risk management, and audit management. I will be explaining about this in detail in this particular slide, and this forms the building blocks of GRC implementation in ServiceNow. So, to begin a governance practice, we begin with all the regulations and the industry practices that we want to implement in the organization in order to ensure good governance. And for this, we have regulations like SOX, HIPAA, then PCI DSS. We have ISO standards like 27001, 31000 for the risk. So these are all called as authority documents. These authority documents can be imported into ServiceNow by integrating with a unified compliance framework. So ServiceNow has a plugin through which you can integrate to the unified compliance framework, and from there you can download all these authority documents into ServiceNow. So when you download these authority documents into ServiceNow, not only the authority documents get downloaded, but every section, article, and controls that are mentioned in these authority documents get created as different citation records. Here, I can explain this with an example. take ISO 27001 as the authority document. So in ISO 27001, in the main standard section, we have 10 sections. So these 10 sections, each of these 10 sections have multiple subsections. So each subsection level is a citation. So understanding the context of the organization is one of the section in the standard. So this will be a citation in ServiceNow, a citation record in ServiceNow. Similarly, we have a control called for screening of candidates prior to employment, which is a control on human resource security. So this control will again become a citation. And information access restriction for systems and application access control is another control which will be a citation. Now I hope you understand what is an authority document. So authority documents are all the standard documents or the regulations released by the regulators. Now we have an external interface to all the regulations and the standards through UCF, and this we have brought into ServiceNow. These are the requirements for our governance practices. With this in hand, now we move on to the policies. So every organization have internal policies to decide and drive on how the organization functions. And these policies, they convey the intent of the organization, and they also align with the requirements of the authority documents. These policies are created in ServiceNow and they can be managed completely in ServiceNow. So you have a life cycle for these policies, which can be completely managed through ServiceNow. And linked to these policies are policy statements. Policy statements are the control templates. So take for example, we have the access control policy, which is aligned with the access control objective in the ISO 27001 standard. So under the access control policy, we will create multiple policy statements. So policy statements, so for user provisioning, we'll have a policy statement. For the password standards, we'll have a policy statement. And then for secure logon practices, we'll have a policy statement. So these are nothing but the controls that would be applied for the different entities which have to follow these policies. So we have the policies now, and under them we have multiple policy statements. So these policy statements can be linked to multiple policies as well. For example, this screening of candidates, it can link back to your human resource security and also your code of conduct. With the policies also defined, we then move on to the risk framework. In the risk framework, we define the different types of risks. So risk framework will be a collection of risk of a similar kind. To give an example of a risk framework, information security risk will be one risk framework. Privacy risk can be another risk. Departmental risks and business risks. So all these are risk frameworks. Under the risk framework, so you can understand that risk framework is nothing but a grouping of common risks that are present in the environment. And under the risk framework, we define the risk statements. Risk statements again are templates for the risks that will be created later on. These are the basic things that we set up when we start implementing the GRC using ServiceNow. After this, we'll be defining various profile types. So profile types are the groups of entities for which a policy or a risk becomes applicable. To give an example of profile type, vendors could be a profile type. So under vendors, we could have multiple vendors like Microsoft, Dell, and Lenovo, and other service providers, and different vendors, IT vendors, then other consulting vendors. So all of these, each of these will be profiles, and all these profiles will be grouped under one profile type called the vendor. to give you another example, business applications could be a profile type, and under business applications we could have the payroll application, your leave management, the sales system. Each of these are the profiles, and business application is the profile type under which these profiles fall. After defining the profile types and the profiles, we can associate the policies and the risk framework to the profile type. Once we associate the policies and risk framework to the profile type, all the policy statements and the risk statements will be converted into risks and controls against each of the profiles. Let me explain this with an example. Now we talked about the access control policy, and under the access control policy we have multiple policy statements like information access restriction, secure logon procedures, password management, use of privileged utility programs. So all these are policy statements, and when they are applied to a system like a payroll system, it means that for the payroll system we need to have a control to restrict the information access. So how do we do restriction of information access? That would be through role-based access or multi-factor authentication. So all these are controls, and these get associated to that specific profile which is called the payroll system. Now with the controls associated to the profile, let's come to the risks. So we talked about risk, information security risk. Under information security risk, we could have multiple risk statements like unauthorized access, compromise of information, availability of business systems. So these are all risk templates. Now, when this risk framework is associated with the profile type, all these risk statements like unauthorized access, compromise of information, they become risks for each of these profiles. So it will become a risk for the payroll system. Unauthorized access becomes a risk for the payroll system, which is mitigated through the control of having role-based access and multi-factor authentication. So I hope now you all understand how the policy statement and risk statement, when it is applied to a profile type, it gets converted into specific risk and control for that particular profile. Now with the risk and control created for a profile, we can do a risk assessment specific to the profile. So payroll might contain many sensitive information of an individual, and hence the risk to this through unauthorized access could be very high. And because of this, you need to take required mitigation actions to ensure that this risk is managed. And with an understanding of these controls and risks, the next step would be associating the indicators, key risk indicators and control indicators. Control indicators, they monitor the performance of the control over a period of time. So we can configure the indicators to be executed every week, every month or once in a quarter, to see how the control is actually being implemented and how is it performing, whether it is performing as desired. If it is not performing as desired, then there are remediation actions that should be created, and it has to be taken by the responsible individuals. Similarly, for risk indicator, again, we specify what is the risk indicator. So now we can take an example of patch management, and in patch management, the control indicator would be the number of systems that have the updated patches. And we may set the control indicator to be at 95%. So if the number of computer systems in the IT infrastructure with the latest patches are more than 95%, then the control is performed as required. But if it comes below that 95%, then the control fails, and the compliance requirements related to that control also fails, and the organization is non-compliant to that particular requirement. Next, we will move on to the audit management portion of GRC. In the audit management application of ServiceNow, users will be able to scope the audits by defining what are the profiles that will be audited in a given audit cycle. And with the scoping done, the auditors can go ahead and create control tests to see how the control is being implemented, whether it is working as required, and whether it is achieving its goal of mitigating a particular risk. And in the audit management, we have users will be able to create 4 types of activities: the control tests, the walkthroughs, the interviews, and activities. So these activities will get assigned to auditors, and once they complete these activities, if there are any observations, they can create these as issues and report the findings of the audit. And the advantage of having indicators associated with the controls and risks is that since these indicators are running often, when the audits are happening, there is information for the auditors to verify how these controls have been performing over a period of time, rather than taking a sample at that point in time. So it gives a good confidence on how the system is being operated and implemented in an organization. So with this understanding of ServiceNow building blocks, let us move on to the maturity model that we want to really focus on in this webinar and in the upcoming webinar sessions. So this is a 5-step maturity model that is defined by ServiceNow for achieving GRC maturity. So in this, we have as always in any system, we have the initial stage where we have just manual processes being implemented, and all of these GRC activities are managed by using spreadsheets, emails, meetings, and over calls. And in some cases, there might be organizations that have automated few portions of these activities, like audit reports, automation of audit reporting, and then policy management that is being automated using a content management system. So all of these will be working in silos. You don't get a complete perspective of how all of these are interacting together and how each of these activities are getting done, and how are we to track it and do the follow-up activities. So it is a huge and humongous task to do all of these manually, and most of the time we might miss out many of the important activities that have to be done, which will be a very high risk to the organization. So organization is deciding to go for an automated solution. If we want to implement everything at the beginning, it is going to be really difficult. So that's why we are going to take a step-by-step approach in achieving the GRC implementation maturity. The next level, the basic level, we will be automating few of the processes that can be started with. So a best place to start, which is suggested by ServiceNow, is to bring in all the policies in the organization and also define the risk framework in the organization in the platform. Once this is defined, so this will be completed in the basic step. So here again, we'll have a level of automation of the policy management, and also you have the risk library defined in ServiceNow and available for you to use going forward. In the next maturity level, which is the repeatable maturity level, we will be defining the profiles on which we will be applying the GRC practices. And once we define the profiles and the profile types, what we can do is we will be associating the risk framework and the policies to these profile types, and we'll be starting to do the actual management of control implementation and risk management through ServiceNow. And why do we call this repeatable? We have the policies and the risk framework defined. Once this is defined, whatever number of profile types you are including, you can apply all of these controls and risks on these profiles, and you can do specific assessment for the new profiles that you have included. So that's why we are calling this stage as a repeatable stage. And we move on to the next maturity level, which is the managed maturity level. In the managed maturity level, we will start associating the indicators to the controls and the risks. When we associate the indicators, we can have different ways in which we are running the indicators. We can have manual tasks created and have someone look at the control implementation in periodic basis, or we can have the indicator itself automated. So I had given an example about patch management. In patch management, we can very well get the details of systems with the patches applied on systems from a server. So this can be automated, and this information can be directly pulled from the server through ServiceNow, and it can indicate the number of systems that are updated with the latest patch. So here we eliminate any reasons for human error, and we get the real-time data. So you can see how powerful an automation solution can be for GRC. This is the managed level. Next, we move towards the optimized level. So maybe we start with the departments, and then we can spread all of these GRC practices to other departments as well, as we grow in the GRC implementation maturity. And in this level, and also in the managed level, we can create a number of reports and dashboards through which your compliance managers and risk managers can get a status of the compliance level within the organization and take any required actions. This is the GRC maturity model that we will be focusing throughout the remaining webinars that we are planning to be putting up. With a good idea of this GRC, building blocks of GRC in ServiceNow and the GRC maturity model, now we'll move on to the actual implementation steps that we want to follow in ServiceNow. In today's session, we'll focus on the basic maturity level, where we'll be creating policies, risk frameworks in ServiceNow, and get a good understanding of how this is done using ServiceNow. And now this is over to Vignesh for giving a demo of all of these aspects. Over to you, Vignesh.
Thank you, Clara. Now, as Clara has explained about the ServiceNow integration with GRC, so I'll go ahead and I'll explain about the plugins that are involved with this integration. So unlike other applications, GRC has multiple plugins with ServiceNow. So you can see around, this is the ServiceNow plugin list in front of your screen. So you can see there are around 20 GRC plugins. Right. And you need not activate all 20 of them. There are like major plugins called GRC Compliance UCF. So via this plugin, you import all the authority documents, you import the citations, right? And then there's another major plugin called GRC Policy and Compliance Management, which is what we'll go in detail today, right? So I'll start off with the starting point of GRC, that is the authority documents. As you can see, the authority documents in a list layout right now. So this is called the list layout view. I can see all the authority documents. Around 12 documents are in this ServiceNow instance. So you can see that these are imported via the plugin activation. So as my colleague mentioned earlier, one of the beautiful part about ServiceNow is they already have this data preloaded inside them, right? You don't have to go and create manual records, or you don't have to mostly like download or import from UCF. So you have preloaded data. Apart from this, if you don't find the authority document, you can go ahead with the UCF, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll open the ISO 27000. So this is related to access control. So this is the authority document for the information technology, right? And now you can see the citations that are related to this specific authority document. And you need not use all the citations. There are only some citations that you might use, that is this 251 citations. So I'll go ahead and I'll look up for a citation that is related to access control. That will be A9.4. .9. So these are all related to access control policies, and you can see these multiple citations along with the description of what they are, right? So now that we have seen authority document and how citations related to that, we'll go to the policy which are defined internally. So the policies come under the policy and compliance application. As I mentioned earlier, the policy and compliance GRC plugin, upon activating that, you will see these modules. All right. So click on policies. As part of the session, we'll create a new policy instead of looking the policies that are preloaded from the plugin. I'll go ahead and I'll create a new policy. So the asterisk symbol means it is a mandatory field. So I'll have to fill in the data. So we'll have to specify the valid to date, that is, which date after does it retire or which date from it expires, right? So I'll put in 1 year from now, that is July 19. I'll add some approvers who will be responsible for approving this policy. I'll add Mike. Notice how approvers aren't mandatory because you need not have approvers filled in such that this policy to proceed at the life cycle at the top. Speaking of life cycle, when you create a new policy, it is always in draft state. And right now what I'm trying to do is to submit it and making it ready for review. That is the next state. That's where the reviews will be crucial, and reviewers are already mandatory, right? So I'll click on reviewers and I'll add some of them. For this testing, I'll add Garfield. So this policy text and description matches a text format input. You can have around 5,000 characters of input over here. And the policy text is where you can paste your entire HTML document. It supports images, it supports all the libraries. So what I'll do is I will open up the actual control policy, right? I'll copy it. It's HTML content with images, as you can see. Right. Yeah, I mean the table, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll paste it here. Now that we have the content, what I'll do is I'll click on submit. You can directly click ready for review, or you can directly click on submit. So I'll sort it by recently created, and you can see there's one created by us. So it is currently in the draft state. So before I submit for ready for review, under a policy you can see something related as policy statements. So policy statements are nothing but it's a template for control, right? So I'll create a new policy statement that will be automatically associated with this. Right. Once I click on submit, that policy statement will be automatically mapped to this policy, as you can see here below. Right. So now that we have done with policy and policy statements, I'll move on to something similar to that. It's called risk frameworks and risk statement. So this will be part of the risk module. As you can see, if I type risk on the left nav, it will come under the risk. So if I click on risk frameworks, which is part of the risk library, I can create a new framework. Submit. So very recently created, you can see this was recently created, and similar to what is said in the policy and policy statement, we can also relate risk statements for frameworks. You can either relate an existing risk statements to the framework, or you can also add a new one. You can see that the risk statement has been related to the risk framework. Right. I think that's it for the first stage of the session today. I'll hand it over to Clara. Thank you.
In today's session, we have seen what GRC practice is all about, and how we can take a step-by-step approach for GRC implementation. And in today's demo, we have seen the first step where we can create policies and manage our policies through the ServiceNow platform, and we can also define the risk library in our organization. So this is the basic and first step that we are going to do in GRC implementation. And in the forthcoming sessions, what we will be seeing is creating profile types, associating the risk statements, risk framework, and the policies to the profile types, and doing an assessment of the risks and attestations of controls. And in the next session, we will be looking at how we will be associating indicators and performing the tests on the controls. Also the audits, how the audit activities are planned and executed, and how all of these is entirely managed on the ServiceNow platform. And now it is over to Kavi.
Thank you, Clara and Vignesh. That was really insightful, and thank you for explaining it as the title suggests, how to take baby steps into GRC. I hope our audience enjoyed the session like me. Thank you all for spending the 40 minutes in understanding the 5-step approach, and we hope that this will help you in streamlining your GRC practice, or understanding more about how ServiceNow's GRC module is working in terms of the first step. We will be back with another session where we'll cover the 2nd-step approach, and we really hope that you will join that session as well. So moving on to the questions, we have a few questions here. So the first question is, the features that you have shown here are out of the box. So is it possible to do customizations, and what are the customizations we can do?
Okay, that is a good question. So we are able to customize it, and based on different customers, right, they ask for a specific notification to go out when a certain control is implemented, or when a certain policy is closed, they want a special field to be displayed. So these are all the customizations that are possible in ServiceNow. And yeah, most of them prefer the out-of-the-box, but we encourage to go for the customization.
Okay, thanks, Vignesh. So the second question is, what are the roles associated with GRC in ServiceNow?
Okay, speaking of roles, I just showed you about policy and risk, right? So regarding policy, there are specific roles called as compliance manager, compliance admin, compliance user, And regarding risk, it is similar: risk manager, risk user, risk admin. So the admins are responsible for all the deletion of tickets, all the moving of tickets. So they can do anything at any point of time. So they're similar to ServiceNow admins, but with less power.
Okay.
Inside their domains.
Okay. Thank you, Vignesh.
No problem.
So there's another question for me, I believe. So will the slides be provided after the session? Yes, we will definitely send you the slides. You can go through the slides, and if you have any questions for Clara or Vignesh in terms of the ServiceNow, you can always shoot back to us. We will definitely be able to help you and answer your questions. And if you want any personalized demo on this module, we'll be glad to give you a demo on that as well. And we are on time, and that's it from us, folks. Thank you all for joining this session, and it's a pleasure to host this session with the speakers here, and it's our pleasure to host this session for you guys. We really believe you enjoyed this session and hope for you to come back to the next sessions as well. Thanks a lot. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.